My name is Linda. I'm 68 years old. Just a few years ago, I was full of energy, gardening, volunteering at the library, even taking dance classes at the senior center. But things changed. First, my husband passed suddenly. Then, one rainy evening, I slipped on my front porch. That fall changed everything. The doctor said I'd heal, but the loneliness didn't. That's when my son Brian insisted I move in with him and his wife Heather. "It'll be easier," he said. "You'll have help when you need it." At the time, I thought I was lucky to have a family that cared. The first few weeks, they were sweet. Heather brought me tea in the mornings. Brian checked in after work. They made me feel welcome, like I belonged. I even thought maybe this wasn't so bad, just a new chapter. But lately, things feel different. I've been waking up groggy, like I haven't really slept. My thoughts feel cloudy. I find myself forgetting what day it is, or why I walked into a room. At first, I chalked it up to aging. Happens to everyone, right? But it's more than that. My body feels heavy, like I'm wading through mud. I've started keeping a notepad beside me to remember simple things. Take pills, eat lunch, call Sarah on Sunday. It's unlike me. Heather seems less patient now. She sighs a lot when I ask her something. And she's taken over organizing my medications, saying it's for my own good. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be difficult, but something about it nags at me. Brian, my sweet boy, has grown distant. He's always busy with work or staring into his phone. When I try to talk to him, he gives me this tight, polite smile and says, "I'm tired, Mom. Can we talk later?" Later never comes. The house feels different, too. Colder, as if I'm in the way. I used to keep a little radio in the kitchen while I cooked, humming old jazz tunes. Heather packed it away, without asking. "Too much noise," she said. Last week, I found a framed photo of me and my late husband sitting in the hallway closet. I didn't put it there. It used to be on the mantel. When I asked, Heather said, "Oh, I just tidied up a bit." She didn't meet my eyes. I try to push the doubts away. I really do. I tell myself I'm just imagining things, that I'm overthinking, but deep down something feels wrong. I've started writing in my journal again just to keep track of my days, what I ate, what pills I took, who said what. Just little things. The habit is grounding. The other night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the moonlight outside my window, wondering if I'm losing my mind or if someone wants me to believe I am. I've always believed in second chances and kindness. I've always trusted the people I love. But lately, I've been feeling like a ghost in my own life. Still here, but fading. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know what's real anymore. But I can feel something shifting. And if I'm not careful, I might slip away entirely. This time, not from a porch step, but from everything I've ever known. And somehow I can't shake this feeling that someone might be helping me disappear. It happened on a Wednesday. I was coming out of the bathroom when I heard Heather talking on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low, hushed, like she didn't want anyone to hear. I stopped in the hallway just outside the doorway, not really trying to eavesdrop, but the words froze me in place. "It won't be long now," she said. There was a pause, then a short laugh. She barely remembers where she puts her shoes. I give it another month, tops. I felt the air leave my chest. I backed away slowly, heart pounding in my ears. She hadn't seen me, and I didn't want her to. I shuffled quietly back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor. My hands were trembling. I tried to tell myself, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she was talking about someone else, but my name wasn't mentioned. And yet it didn't have to be. Her voice had that tone familiar to anyone who's ever heard someone speaking behind their back. Dismissive, triumphant. Later that evening, Heather brought me a bowl of soup like nothing had happened. She smiled too wide and asked how I was feeling. I couldn't bring myself to look her in the eye. My stomach turned at the smell of the food. That night, I barely slept. A few days later, I caught her in my room. It was late morning, and I had been sitting on the back patio for some fresh air. I came in through the side door quietly, and when I reached my bedroom, the door was ajar. Heather was inside, crouched near my dresser, going through the top drawer, the same drawer where I keep my journal. She didn't hear me at first, so I cleared my throat softly. She jumped. Oh, Linda, I was just, looking for a clean hand towel. I thought I saw some in here. We both knew it was a lie. There are towels in the hallway closet, I said gently. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice. I just held her gaze, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Oh, right, she mumbled, brushing past me quickly. My mistake. I stood in the center of my room after she left, trying to calm the tightness in my chest. I opened the drawer. My journal was there, but something about its placement felt off, like it had been moved, flipped through. I don't know what she expected to find, but I was sure she had been looking for something. Brian came home later that afternoon. I thought about telling him. I really did. But when I tried to bring it up casually, gently, he cut me off. Heather says you've been acting paranoid lately, he said, not even glancing up from his phone. Mom, she's helping you. We're doing our best. Maybe try being a little more grateful. Okay, grateful. That word hit me like a slap. I spent most of my life raising Brian, sacrificing, giving, loving, and now I was supposed to be grateful for being watched, silenced, dismissed. I nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat, and walked away before he could see the tears forming in my eyes. Over dinner that night, they talked over me like I wasn't even there. Bills, groceries, a vacation Heather wanted to take. No one asked how I was feeling, if I'd slept, if I needed anything. I sat there quietly pushing food around on my plate, wondering when I had stopped being a mother and started becoming a problem. Something in this house had shifted. I felt it in the silence, in the way they spoke to me, in the absence of kindness that used to come so easily. I began to question everything. Every smile, every pill handed to me, every bite of food. I was starting to feel like a ghost in my own life. And what scared me the most was how quickly they seemed ready to let me disappear. The first time it happened, I thought maybe I'd just forgotten. It was early morning and I reached for the little tray where Heather usually left my daily medications. It was empty. Strange because I hadn't taken anything yet. My routine was solid. I always waited until after breakfast. But that morning, the tray was bare. I walked into the kitchen confused. Heather was already there sipping coffee, scrolling on her phone. Heather, I said gently, did you already give me my pills? She didn't even look up. Yeah, I did. You must have taken them and forgot. I paused. I'm pretty sure I didn't. She finally looked at me just for a moment. Linda, you've been forgetful lately. I'm keeping track, okay? Just trust me. She said it so smoothly, so confidently that for a moment I doubted myself, but only for a moment because I knew. I knew I hadn't taken them that day. I felt sluggish. My legs ached. My hands trembled when I tried to pour tea. I told myself it was just a bad morning, maybe the weather. But deep down, something clenched tight in my stomach. A quiet alarm going off. The next morning, the tray was empty again. This time I didn't ask. I just smiled politely and pretended everything was fine. That afternoon, when Heather went out to run errands, I opened my bedroom drawer and took out the backup pills I'd saved, just a few from an earlier refill. I tucked them into an old floral teacup on my bookshelf, hidden behind a row of mystery novels. I didn't want to believe she was doing this. I didn't want to think my own daughter-in-law could be so cruel, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The following morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I tiptoed to the shelf, moved the books aside, and froze. The teacup was empty, gone. I stood there for a long time, staring into the hollow porcelain bowl like it might explain itself. My heart raced. My mouth went dry. I felt like someone had reached inside me and pulled the floor out from under my feet. She knew. Heather knew I was hiding them, and she took them anyway. My hands shook as I sat on the edge of the bed. I felt exposed, vulnerable, powerless. That day, my whole body felt like it was moving underwater. I couldn't finish my toast. My knees buckled when I stood. I gripped the counter like it was the only thing anchoring me to the world. And still I said nothing because what would I say? That I suspected she was stealing my medication? That I felt weaker? Brian had already dismissed me. And Heather was clever, always sweet and calm when others were around, always smiling, the kind of woman who knew how to weaponize kindness. I started checking my pill tray obsessively. Sometimes they were there, sometimes not. There was no pattern, just a slow, quiet unraveling of my body and mind. And still I kept notes. Every time I felt dizzy, every time I noticed something strange, I wrote it down in a little spiral notebook I kept tucked into my pillowcase. I began tracking the days the pills were missing and how I felt afterward. I had no plan, no proof, just fear and a slowly growing certainty that someone I lived with wanted me gone. And what terrified me most wasn't just the missing pills. It was how no one seemed to notice I was fading. Not even my son, not even Brian. They thought I was slipping. And maybe in some ways I was, but not in the ways that mattered. Yes, I was tired. Yes, I forgot little things sometimes. But my instincts were still sharp, my mind still mine. The world around me had started to feel like a stage, and I was suddenly cast as the fragile old woman, helpless and fading. I never agreed to that role, so I decided to play along just enough to see what would happen. I began pretending to be more confused than I was. If Heather asked me what day it was, I'd pause, furrow my brow, and guess wrong. If she told me I'd already taken my pills, I'd smile and say, "Oh, dear, I must be losing it." And every time I played the part, she grew more confident. Her tone got softer, more syrupy. Her fake concern became theatrical, tilting her head just so, sighing dramatically, even patting my hand like I was a child. If I asked where my tea was, she'd gasp, "You just drank it, remember?" When I knew I hadn't, she wanted me to believe I was losing my grip. But I wasn't. I started keeping a second journal, hidden of course. I wrote down everything. What time I woke up, what pills I took or didn't, how I felt that day, what Heather said, what Brian didn't. I noted every strange glance, every misdose, every overly sweet word that didn't match the coldness in her eyes. I made careful observations, like how Heather always hovered when it was time for my medication, or how she flinched if I ever reached for the pill tray myself. I noticed how she offered me tea only on certain days, and how afterward I felt drowsy and disoriented. I tracked everything, not just for myself anymore, but because a thought had started to bloom dark and ugly. Maybe she wasn't just being cruel. Maybe she wasn't just impatient. Maybe she was trying to speed things up, trying to make me deteriorate faster, trying to make it look natural. The slow decline of an old woman, nothing more. No questions asked, no suspicions raised. And the more I watched her, the more I saw it, hidden behind her polite smiles and soft voice. The hints, the patterns, the cold calculation. That realization chilled me to my bones. But I didn't panic. I kept playing my role. Quiet, forgetful, compliant. Because if Heather thought I was fading, she'd get careless. I needed her to slip up because while she thought I was losing my mind, I was using it more than I ever had. It was a Tuesday morning, and Heather had gone out to run errands. I watched her car pull out of the driveway from behind the curtain, my heart pounding. I knew I didn't have long. I picked up the phone and called Lisa, my next-door neighbor. We weren't close friends, but she was kind. One of those people who always smiled when she saw me outside, who brought soup when I had the flu last winter. When she picked up, I kept my voice calm. "Lisa, could you do me a small favor?" Within 15 minutes, she was at my door, car keys in hand. I told her I needed to visit my lawyer. I didn't offer details, and to her credit, she didn't press. She just helped me into her car, buckled my seatbelt, and drove. The whole ride, my hands trembled in my lap. Not from age, but from nerves. From the weight of what I was about to do. Mr. Alvarez had been my family's lawyer for nearly 20 years. He was the one who handled our estate when my husband passed. He remembered me well and greeted me with that same professional warmth he always had. "What brings you in, Linda?" he asked as we settled into his quiet office. I didn't waste time. "I want to update my will," I said urgently. He raised an eyebrow. "Of course. Are you certain everything is okay?" "No," I said simply, "but I'm doing something about it." He opened the file on his desk. My current will was drafted 3 years ago. Brian and Heather were listed as my primary beneficiaries. If anything happened to me, everything, my house, my accounts, my savings, would go to them. I want them removed, I said completely. He blinked. Are you sure? I've never been more sure in my life. I handed him a piece of paper with a name written on it. Sarah, my late sister's daughter, my niece. She visits me every month and calls every Sunday. She doesn't want anything from me, just my time. She's always been good to me, and she doesn't think I'm disposable. He nodded slowly, then leaned forward. Do you want to tell me what's going on? So I told him. Not everything. I didn't have time, but enough. Enough for his smile to fade, for his voice to grow tight. Is there anything in writing? Proof, he asked.
Working on it, I said.
But right now, I just need to protect what I've earned. We spent an hour going over the changes, my assets, my accounts, my instructions. Everything would now go to Sarah. And if something happened to me under suspicious circumstances, Mr. Alvarez was instructed to initiate an independent review, no matter what Heather or Brian claimed. When I signed the new documents, I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. Not relief exactly, but strength, like I had taken back something they tried to steal. Lisa waited patiently in the lobby the whole time. On the drive back, she glanced at me sideways. You okay? She asked softly. I smiled. Not yet, but I will be. When we pulled into the driveway, Heather's car still wasn't there. I thanked Lisa, stepped inside, and carefully placed my copy of the new will in a sealed envelope beneath the liner of my suitcase in the closet, somewhere Heather would never look because she thought I had no fight left in me. But she was wrong. She didn't know what I had just done. And she certainly didn't know. I had just taken her name off everything. After I changed the will, something in me shifted. I no longer felt like a helpless woman waiting for whatever came next. I had done something. I had taken the first step toward protecting myself. And now I was ready to finish what I started. But to do that, I had to be smart and careful. I couldn't confront Heather outright. She would just twist my words and make me look unstable. No, I had to let her believe she was winning. So I gave her a show. I started acting slower, more confused. I'd walk into the kitchen, pause mid-step, and say, "What was I coming in here for again?" I'd forget what day it was. I'd repeat questions and stumble a little when I stood up. I let my hand tremble when she handed me my tea. And Heather, she bought every bit of it. She became bolder, more careless. There was a smirk that started to creep into her voice when she spoke to me, like she was enjoying the performance. She even started calling me sweetheart in this syrupy tone, like I was 5 years old. But underneath that smile, I saw it. Her greed, her hunger for whatever she thought she was about to inherit. One afternoon, I saw her standing at the kitchen trash can. She didn't know I was watching. I had walked in quietly, barefoot, and paused just outside the doorway. She was holding one of my prescription bottles, not empty. I watched as she glanced over her shoulder, then dropped it into the garbage and covered it with a paper towel. I didn't move. I didn't gasp. I just quietly backed away, returned to my room, and wrote the exact time, date, and medication into my notebook. Every small moment, I recorded it. I also asked Lisa, God bless her, to help me. She was hesitant at first, but when I told her what I suspected, she didn't hesitate long. We started with little things, recording some of my conversations with Heather using a small audio recorder Lisa let me borrow. Heather never noticed. In one clip, you could hear me asking about my medication and Heather snapping, "You already had it. Stop asking the same question 10 times. I only asked once." In another, I asked where my journal had gone, one I had left on my nightstand. Heather replied with icy coldness, "You must have misplaced it again. Maybe it's time we look into memory care." Memory care. That word chilled me. She was laying the groundwork, trying to paint me as incapable, probably hoping Brian would sign off on placing me somewhere out of sight, out of the way, and out of her reach, so she could finally take what she thought was hers. And Brian, he didn't see any of it. Or maybe he just didn't want to. When he got home, she'd hand him a beer, kiss his cheek, and say, "Your mom had a rough day again." He'd nod, barely glancing at me, and say, "She's been through a lot." Yes, I had, but I wasn't through yet. Every night, I double-checked my recordings, hid my notes, backed up everything with Lisa's help. I felt like a detective in my own home, living behind glass, building a case no one else could see. The more Heather slipped up, the more I documented, and the more I pretended to crumble, the more power I quietly gathered. She thought she was making me disappear. But what she didn't know was that I'd already made her irrelevant. I waited until Heather left the house. She'd gone to get her nails done or shop or meet a friend. I didn't care. I just knew I had a window, a brief sliver of time alone with my son. I had to try one last time. Brian was sitting on the couch, half watching a game on the TV, half scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I stepped into the room. "Brian," I said softly. He mumbled something that sounded like, "Yeah," but didn't take his eyes off the screen. "Can we talk for a minute?" That got his attention, barely. He sighed and put his phone on the armrest, but didn't turn toward me. He just sat there staring straight ahead. I lowered myself onto the armchair across from him. My hands rested in my lap, folded together, knuckles pale. "Do you remember Sunday mornings?" I began. He blinked. "You'd wake up at dawn, jump on my bed, and demand pancakes. We'd go to the kitchen in our pajamas. You with your little bear slippers, me with coffee barely keeping me upright. You always wanted extra whipped cream." He chuckled once, soft and involuntary, but it faded fast. "I remember," he said. "I used to think those mornings were the happiest of my life," I said, my voice trembling. "Even when your father was away, even when we barely had enough to cover the bills, you made it worth it." He shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "And when you had nightmares, remember how you'd come to my room? I'd hold you until you fell asleep. You'd tuck your face under my arm and say, 'Don't let the dark get me, Mom.'" His jaw tightened. "I never let it, Brian," I said, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. "I kept the dark away for as long as I could. I gave up school. I gave up travel. I gave up me so you could become you." He still wouldn't look at me. "I don't want money," I said. "I don't want control. I just want my son to see me, to believe me, to remember me." "Before she told you I was a burden, before she convinced you I was fading," Brian rubbed his forehead. "Heather says, 'We can't coddle you anymore,'" he muttered. And just like that, something inside me cracked. Coddle me? My mind flashed to every scraped knee I kissed, every hour I worked overtime while he was sick in bed, every single thing I sacrificed so he'd never have to feel alone or unloved. Coddle. "I'm not asking for coddling," I said quietly. "I'm asking for the decency of being treated like I still matter." His lips pressed into a thin line. "You've been confused lately, forgetting things. Heather's just trying to help." "No," I said sharply, and he looked up, startled. "Heather is helping herself, and you're letting her." He stood suddenly. "I can't do this right now." "Of course you can't," I whispered, "because doing this would mean facing what you've become." He walked away without another word. I sat there long after he was gone, staring at the empty space he'd left behind. My chest felt hollow, but my eyes were dry. I had no more tears to give. My son was still alive, still breathing, still under the same roof. But I'd never felt further from him. And in that silence, that wide-open void he left behind, something inside me stopped breaking and started building. A wall, a boundary, a promise to myself. This ends with me, not because of me. The plan came to me in pieces over sleepless nights and long, hollow mornings. Heather was growing careless, too sure of herself, too sure I couldn't fight back. She thought she had me where she wanted me. Confused, compliant, crumbling. So, I gave her exactly what she expected. That morning, my pills were missing again. The tray was empty when I opened it, even though I knew I hadn't taken them. Heather breezed by my door a few minutes later with her usual sugary smile. "How are we feeling today, Linda?" she asked, almost singing. "Foggy," I replied, rubbing my forehead. "I think I forgot my pills again." She nodded sympathetically. "Don't worry, sweetheart. That happens sometimes." I smiled back. "You're always so helpful." She didn't see the edge in my voice. That night, she brought me a cup of tea. Chamomile, she claimed. Warm, comforting for your nerves, she said, setting it gently on my nightstand. Drink up. I nodded, took the cup, and waited for her to leave the room. Then I poured it quietly into the fake potted plant on my windowsill. I sat on my bed for the next hour, heart thudding like a drum. I rehearsed the next part in my mind over and over again. I waited until they were both home. Heather was in the kitchen, and Brian was watching TV. Then I walked out into the living room, slow and deliberate. I clutched the edge of the wall and let my knees wobble. My breathing grew ragged, deliberately so. And then I gasped.
Oh.
Oh. I crumpled to the floor. My body landed hard against the tile, but I didn't cry out. I let my eyes close and my limbs go limp. I heard the clatter of something dropping. Heather's voice shot out first, sharper than usual. Linda. Nothing in her tone sounded like concern. Brian jumped up. Mom, what happened? I kept still, breathing shallow, and listening. Call 911, Brian said, his voice panicked. There was a beat of silence. Then Heather's voice was low, almost annoyed. Maybe we wait a minute. See if she's just fainted. Wait a minute. I nearly broke my silence then, but I held on. Something's wrong. She's barely breathing, Brian said. I'm just saying, maybe it's not serious. You know, she's been dramatic lately.
Dramatic.
Another slap right in the chest. I'm calling, Brian said firmly. I heard him grab the phone and walk into the hallway. Another pause. Then the lightest touch of Heather's hand brushing my arm. Her whisper was right near my ear. You just don't know when to quit, do you? I didn't move. Not yet. But I felt a fire spark in my chest, brighter than fear, brighter than grief, because now I had heard it. Everything I needed. The hospital room was cold, with the sterile hum of machines and the soft rustle of nurses passing by my door. I was propped up in bed, heart monitor quietly beeping, for in my arm. The doctor stood at the foot of my bed, flipping through my chart with furrowed brows. Mrs. Taylor, he said, your blood work shows inconsistent levels of your prescribed medications, some too low, others unexpectedly absent. You're also showing signs of long-term underdosing. I didn't flinch. I'd expected it. So, he asked gently, have you been taking your medications regularly? I looked him straight in the eyes. No, I said, because someone's been taking them from me. He exchanged a quick glance with the nurse beside him, who stepped forward. Do you know who? Yes, I whispered. My daughter-in-law, Heather. There was a long pause. Can you tell us what's been going on?
So I did.
I told them everything about the missing pills, about the days I felt drugged or drained, about the tea I never drank, about the smiles that masked something colder. I spoke slowly and carefully, every word soaked in months of fear and grief. Then I told them about the journal, the recordings, the fake collapse. I left nothing out. The nurse's face softened. You did the right thing coming forward. I swallowed hard. I was afraid no one would believe me. She stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on my arm. You're not crazy, she said. And you're not alone. We see this more often than you think. That broke something in me. A deep knot of shame and silence began to unravel. A social worker came in later that afternoon. She listened, took notes, and asked if I had someone who could bring in the documentation I mentioned. I called Lisa. Within the hour, she arrived, holding a brown folder clutched tightly in her hands. She sat beside me, silent but steady, as I handed everything over. My journal, the notes, the audio files. She even showed them the voice clip where Heather whispered into my ear while I lay unconscious. The moment it played, the nurse's mouth tightened into a firm line. A formal report was filed. By the end of the day, I wasn't just another patient anymore. I was a case, a voice, a woman being heard finally, for the first time in a long time. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath all the trembling and fatigue, I felt it. The beginning of justice. The social worker's name was Karen, and she didn't waste time. 2 days after I gave the hospital my evidence, she paid a visit to Brian and Heather. I wasn't there, of course. By then, I'd been relocated to a temporary care home for my own safety. But Lisa later told me everything she heard from a neighbor who watched it all unfold from her porch. Karen arrived unannounced, armed with documents, recordings, and a quiet authority that didn't need to raise its voice. Heather answered the door, surprised but smiling sweetly. That smile didn't last long. Inside, Karen asked to see my medications. Heather hesitated, then went to the kitchen. The bottles were there, but something didn't add up. Half-empty containers that should have been full. Dosages mismatched. Some medications were expired, others tampered with. There were inconsistencies too obvious to ignore. Karen remained calm and professional. She began asking questions. Heather fumbled through her answers. Linda's been forgetful.
She throws things away.
She insists she hasn't taken her meds even when she has. She's not well. Then Karen played the audio clip, the one where Heather whispered into my ear while I lay unconscious on the floor. You just don't know when to quit, do you? There was no talking her way out of that. Karen looked her in the eye and asked again, have you been withholding medication from your mother-in-law? Heather didn't answer. That's when Brian walked in. Karen turned to him. Mr. Taylor, are you aware of what's been happening in this house? According to Lisa's friend, Brian didn't speak at first. He looked at Heather, then down at the floor, his face pale, his shoulders sagging. He looked like a boy caught cheating on a test, ashamed but too weak to do anything about it. I didn't know, he said finally, voice flat. I thought she was just getting worse. Karen didn't respond. She didn't have to because now it was official. An investigation had been opened. That evening, I sat in a sunlit corner of the care home, sipping warm tea wrapped in a soft knit blanket. The place wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, peaceful, and most importantly, safe. A nurse named Hannah checked in on me every hour, smiling kindly, treating me like a person, not a problem. She brought me extra sugar for my tea and asked if I wanted to join the book club on Wednesday. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. No pretending, no acting, no fear of what might be missing in the morning. Just rest. Real rest. I lay in bed that night, watching the moonlight spill through the curtains. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like the darkness wasn't pressing in anymore. It was lifting because someone finally believed me. And now the people who tried to silence me, they were the ones being watched. It was a quiet afternoon at the care home when Mr. Alvarez arrived. I was sitting near the window watching a squirrel hop along the garden fence when I heard his familiar knock, the same gentle rhythm he'd used for years. He stepped in, briefcase in hand, his face calm but warm. Linda, he said, we're ready. He laid the folder in front of me, inside the final version of my new will. I took a deep breath and opened it. Everything we discussed was there, exactly as I asked. My modest home, my savings, my life insurance, all legally redirected. Brian and Heather officially removed. A no-contest clause added. In their place, my niece Sarah, the one who never forgot a birthday, who sent me letters when others didn't bother calling. She was getting a portion, enough to build the bakery she'd always dreamed about. Lisa, my neighbor, my quiet guardian when I couldn't speak for myself, was named as a beneficiary, too. She would receive a token of gratitude and my late mother's heirloom locket, something she once admired with such tenderness, and the rest, a sizable donation to a local women's shelter, where women like me, silenced and dismissed, would find a voice and a roof. A chance? I smiled. This is perfect, I said, reaching for the pen. Are you sure? Mr. Alvarez asked gently. I've never been more sure in my life. With a firm hand, I signed my name, each stroke deliberate, each letter carrying the weight of everything they tried to take from me. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the ink drying on the paper. Justice, I thought, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a signature. Sometimes it's written in ink, not revenge. Mr. Alvarez packed the folder, then stood. Would you like me to deliver the update to Brian personally? I shook my head.
No.
Let them find out the same way I found out about their lies. Quietly, without warning.
He smiled, poetic.
Exactly. As he left, I watched him walk through the garden, briefcase in hand, sunlight dancing around him, and I thought, they planned my ending. But I rewrote it myself. It didn't take long for word to spread. A few days after Mr. Alvarez finalized everything, Brian called. I let the phone ring twice before answering. I didn't greet him. I just waited. "Mom," he said, his voice tight like he was holding back anger or guilt. "Why would you do this? Why would you change the will without talking to me?" I stayed silent for a moment, letting the question hang in the air like a storm cloud. Then I said, "Why did you let your wife try to erase me?" There was nothing on the other end. Just breath, just silence. "That's not what happened," he said weakly. "She tampered with my medication, Brian. She left me on the floor and hesitated to call 911. She rifled through my drawers, lied to my face, and smiled while doing it." "And you? You let her?" "I didn't know," he muttered. "You didn't want to know." I could hear the shame crackling in his voice. "She told me you were confused, that you were getting worse, and you believed her over your own mother." He didn't respond. I didn't need him to. "I loved you so much," I said quietly. "I gave you everything. But I won't give you what's left of me while you stand behind someone who tried to bury me alive." He sniffed like he might cry, but I felt nothing. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't begging. I was done. "I hope someday you look at your son," I continued, "and remember what it means to protect someone, because I remembered every single day of your life. You just forgot." Then I hung up. I haven't answered his calls since. Heather wasn't so lucky with the hospital's report, the audio recordings, and Lisa's sworn statement. The state pressed charges: elder neglect, prescription tampering, attempted financial exploitation. Her lawyer tried to play the sympathy card. She was overwhelmed. Her intentions were misunderstood. She cared deeply for her mother-in-law. But crocodile tears don't erase evidence. And compassion isn't something you fake when no one's watching. I watched the local news report from my care home, sipping chamomile tea that I actually made myself. Her photo flashed across the screen, once polished, now pale, her eyes no longer smug, just tired. Cornered, I heard from Lisa that neighbors had started pulling away. Some unfriended them online, others crossed the street to avoid conversation. There were whispers at the grocery store. Some even asked if the story was true, if Heather had really done what they'd heard. Apparently, Brian rarely leaves the house anymore. Apparently, Heather's salon visits have stopped entirely. Apparently, the world they built on lies is slowly caving in. And I sleep in peace. Not because I hurt them, but because I stopped letting them hurt me. The day Sarah pulled up in front of my new home, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. It wasn't a grand mansion or some clinical facility. It was a cheerful little house with sky blue shutters and flower boxes overflowing with petunias, just down the street from her own place. She helped me out of the car, her arm gentle and steady. "You sure this is okay?" she asked. "It's small, but the porch swing works, and there's a big window in the living room you'll love." I looked around and smiled. It's perfect. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and fresh bread. The landlady, Joan, greeted me with a wide smile and open arms. "We're a family here," she said. "We look out for each other." And just like that, I felt it: the warmth, the welcome, the dignity. A few days later, I unpacked the last of my things. My late husband's books lined the shelf. The photo of baby Brian stayed on my nightstand, not because I missed the man he'd become, but because I'll always love the boy he was. On Sundays, Lisa visits. We sit on the porch swing with coffee and raspberry scones she bakes from scratch. She updates me on her garden, on neighborhood gossip, on anything but pity. We laugh like old friends because we are. Sarah drops by often, too. She brings her little dog, Max, and we take short walks together, stopping to wave at neighbors who now know me by name. And best of all, I started teaching piano again. It began with one neighbor's kid asking if I still remembered Twinkle, Twinkle. Now I've got 5 students, their little hands stumbling through scales, eyes wide when they finally get it right. The joy in their faces makes my heart hum. They call me Miss Linda, not ma'am, not old lady, just Miss Linda. And with every note we play, I feel something rebuild inside me. Because I'm not useless. I'm not fading. I'm not some forgotten woman collecting dust in a shadowed room.
I'm alive. I'm thriving.
And for the first time in years, I feel seen, not as a burden, but as someone still becoming. I didn't lose a family. I found a new one. One that doesn't ask what I can give, but simply says, "We're glad you're here." I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who told her story publicly. For most of my life, I believed in keeping things private. Pain, betrayal, heartbreak, tucked away neatly behind smiles and small talk. That's what we were taught, wasn't it?
Keep your voice down.
Don't make trouble. Be grateful. Be quiet. But silence nearly destroyed me.
So now I speak.
It started with a letter. I sat at my little desk by the window and began to write, not with anger, but with clarity. I wrote every detail. The missing pills, the whispered insults, the manipulation, and the moment I decided I wasn't going to disappear. I didn't write it to get even. I wrote it to get free. And then I kept going. Pages turned into chapters. Pain turned into strength. I wrote about resilience. Not just mine, but the kind that lives inside so many women who are told they don't matter anymore. I titled the manuscript My Story, not theirs, because that's what this has always been. Not their version of who I am. Not the daughter-in-law who smiled while hiding cruelty behind kindness. Not the son who convinced himself I was too far gone to fight back. No, this is my story and I'm the one telling it. I shared pieces of it with Sarah, and she cried. Then she showed it to a friend who worked at the local women's center. A week later, I was invited to speak at their next event. Something small, they said. Just a circle of women, many of them older, who'd been through their own quiet battles. I was nervous, but I went. And when I stood in front of that room, heart pounding, hands slightly shaking, I looked into their faces and felt something shift again. Belonging. I told them about how easy it is to dismiss red flags when they come from people you love. About how gaslighting isn't always loud. It's subtle, soft, disguised as concern. I told them how I doubted myself, how I stayed silent, how I almost let myself slip away. But then I told them how I took it back, how I changed the will, hid the pills, recorded the whispers, faked the collapse, how I used the very performance they expected from me as the armor that saved me. One woman came up to me afterward, tears in her eyes. "My daughter's doing something similar," she whispered. I thought I was imagining it. I put my hand over hers. "You're not." We stood there a long time. Since then, I've spoken at 3 more centers. I've handed out copies of my story. I've sat with women who just needed someone to say, "I believe you." And I've told them what I wish someone had told me sooner. You are not powerless. You are not crazy. And you are not done. I remind them to protect themselves, not just emotionally, but legally. To keep copies of their wills, their medical charts, their passwords, to document, to ask questions, to teach their children that respect isn't optional. I'm no one's hero, but I am a warning. And more importantly, I'm a reminder that your voice still matters, that it is never too late to write your own ending, and that survival isn't just getting through the worst parts, it's turning them into purpose. The breeze rustles the leaves above me as I sit in my small garden, the sun filtering through like golden lace. The air smells faintly of lavender and soil. And Max, Sarah's little dog, sleeps at my feet, tail twitching with dreams. I rest my journal on my lap, pen paused between my fingers. I've written so much these past few months. Some of it was messy, raw, unfiltered. Some of it came out like poetry. All of it was real. And today feels like a good day to finish this chapter. People always think of a will as a legal document, a list of things we leave behind when we're gone. But no one ever talks about the other kind, the kind that keeps you going when everything tries to pull you under, your will to live. Heather never saw that one coming. She thought I was ready to fade. She looked at my age and saw weakness. She saw pills and wrinkles and called it the end of a story. But what she didn't see, what none of them saw, was the part of me that still burned. The part that refused to be erased. I think about that night I lay on the cold tile floor, faking unconsciousness while she stood over me, waiting, calculating. And how even in that moment, I had one thought running through my head. I am still here. That thought became my armor. It carried me through hospitals, through legal appointments, through the long quiet nights when I questioned if I had done the right thing. But now, sitting in this garden, my garden, I know that I did. Sarah stops by after work most evenings. She brings fresh fruit, sometimes stories about her coworkers, sometimes a new recipe to try. We laugh over burnt toast and uneven pies. And it's never perfect, but it's real. It's love performance. Lisa visits every Sunday, rain or shine. She always brings a new book recommendation and a firm hug. She calls me fireproof. I used to laugh at that. Now I believe it. I'm surrounded by warmth, by people who see me not as a project, not as a responsibility, but as someone still becoming. I teach piano on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The kids call me Miss Linda, and when they hit the right notes, I clap like they just played Carnegie Hall. Their parents send me thank you notes and muffins. The little ones hug me tightly before they leave. They don't see an old woman. They just see someone who cares. I look down at the page and begin writing. They tried to speed up my ending, but I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. My eyes fill not from sadness, but from gratitude. Because what they didn't understand, what Heather could never imagine, is that surviving wasn't the end of the story. Reclaiming my life was. I have a new kind of peace now. Not the kind that comes from silence or surrender, but the kind that comes from knowing you stood up, that you were counted, that you didn't let them write your ending with whispers and pills and locked drawers. They tried to reduce me to nothing. But I found everything.